The man already knew her name. That was the thing she kept returning to afterward, standing in the elevator with her hand not quite pressing the button for her floor. He had looked up from his desk the moment she walked through the wrong door, not startled, not annoyed, and said, "Ms. Mays, the way you say the name of someone you've been expecting. Come. Prepared." Like a file he had already reviewed and set aside for later. She had been carrying a folder meant for the CFO's office, which was one door to the left of the door she opened. 32 years of navigating buildings, people, and situations that were never designed for her, and she had pulled the wrong handle on a Tuesday morning. That was all it was supposed to be. The office was nearly empty. One laptop. A yellow legal pad with handwriting she couldn't read from where she stood. Small, deliberate marks in what she understood, filing the observation away immediately, was not English. A single pen placed parallel to the pad's right edge with the precision of someone who could not function in disorder. The window behind his desk faced east, and the October light came in flat and colorless. There were no personal items. No photographs. Not even a coffee cup. The room looked like a place where someone was doing a job and had no intention of pretending otherwise. He was watching her the way a person watches something they've already categorized. "Ms. Mays," he said again, and gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "You can sit down." She did not sit down. She set her folder, the wrong folder, the CFO's folder, the folder that had nothing to do with this room or this man, flat on the front edge of his desk. She put both hands on top of it. She looked at him. "You have the wrong impression," she said. "I was looking for Richard Paulson's office." "I know." He said it without any particular emphasis. "His office is one door left. You're welcome to go." She didn't move. He looked like a man in his mid-40s who had made peace with something a long time ago. Not happiness, exactly, but a kind of settled purposefulness. His suit was charcoal and perfectly fitted, and she noted, with a part of her brain that never fully stopped working, that it had not come off any rack in this city. His hands were folded on the legal pad, and he was not performing patience. He simply had it. "I already know why you're here," she said. She did not know why she was there. She was constructing it in real time, sentence by sentence, the way she had learned to do in rooms where she was outnumbered. "And I think you already know what I'm going to say about it." He studied her for a moment. Something shifted in his expression, not softened, not cracked, but recalibrated, the way a person recalibrates when a situation reveals itself to be more interesting than anticipated. "Then we'll save time," he said. She picked up her folder. She walked out. In the elevator, the doors closed, and the polished metal gave her back her own reflection. She looked at herself for the full descent, 14 floors, and did not look away. Her collar was straight. Her earrings, her grandmother's gold teardrops that she wore only on days that required armor, caught the light. She adjusted her collar anyway. It did not need adjusting. She did it anyway. She was 3 steps off the elevator when her assistant Dara was already moving toward her, and from the look on Dara's face, something had broken while she was upstairs. "They made an announcement," Dara said. She was holding a printed email with both hands, which meant it was the kind of news she did not trust herself to deliver correctly from memory. "The board sent it company-wide 5 minutes ago." Celestine took the paper. The announcement was 2 paragraphs. The second paragraph confirmed that COJ1, Chief Restructuring Officer, had been granted termination authority for up to 30% of staff across all non-revenue generating departments. She read the paragraph once. Then she looked back at the elevator. The doors were closed. He had known her name before she walked through that door. She turned back to Dara. "Schedule a team meeting," she said. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Tell them nothing until I'm in the room." She walked to her office, and the door clicked shut behind her. She moved through the next 36 hours the way she had always moved through danger. Not away from it, but through it, clean and deliberate, like a woman who had done this before and knew that panic was a luxury she could not afford and had never been able to afford and had stopped wanting long ago. By 8 that evening she had pulled every operational metric her department had generated in the last 4 years, annotated them in the margins of 3 legal pads, and built a preservation case so thorough that it could have survived cross-examination. She had done this before, not with the exact same threat, but with threats that rhymed. She knew how to make a department look indispensable because she had spent 23 years learning the language that the people with authority over her actually spoke. Not effort. Numbers. Not loyalty. Revenue-adjacent outcomes. Not decades of service. Cost per error ratios and turnaround benchmarks, and the kind of operational efficiency data that made executives go quiet and reconsider. Her team met at 9, as she said they would. She told them the truth about what she knew and was measured about what she didn't. She watched their faces, and she could see the ones who were already calculating and the ones who were frightened and the ones, like Marcus, who had been in this building long enough to recognize a particular kind of institutional weather. She did not reassure them with things she couldn't guarantee. She told them to document everything, to work cleanly, and to come to her with any direct contact from J1's office before responding to it themselves. She walked back to her office after the meeting and sat down, and the building noise settled around her the way it always did mid-morning, the particular hum of a place going about its business, and she straightened the stapler, the pen cup, and the framed photograph of her 2 nieces at the beach in the matching yellow dresses. None of it had moved. She straightened it anyway. Then she opened her grandmother's leather notebook, not to write in it, just opened it, let it lie flat on the desk in front of her, and she sat there for a moment with her hands resting on either side of it like she was holding something steady that was not in danger of falling. The notepad was too large for a purse and too worn to be professional by anyone else's measure, the cover restitched along the spine twice over 30 years, and the leather darkened in the corners from decades of being carried. She had stopped explaining it to people who asked. She had stopped needing to explain it to herself. The handwritten note arrived at 11:15. Delivered by a young man she didn't recognize from an office she hadn't been summoned to before. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. My office. And then a floor number. Nothing else. No name. No signature. No please. Just a floor number and a time, written in the same deliberate hand she had glimpsed on his legal pad, and she sat with it for exactly as long as she needed to before she put it face down on the desk. She did not RSVP. That evening, Marcus appeared in her doorway at 6:40, when most of the floor had already gone quiet. He had worked in this building for 19 years, and he brought information the way men of his particular competence and loyalty always did. Not with alarm, but with a steadiness that meant the alarm was justified. He's met with 3 other departments, Marcus said. He stayed in the doorway, which was his way of saying this was not a conversation she had to have if she wasn't ready. Pillar, Henderson, and the people in resource planning. She waited. All 3, he said, turned in voluntary separation paperwork by end of business. The word voluntary sat between them for a moment. Marcus said it the way you repeat a word in a foreign language that you understand technically but cannot quite believe the definition of. Thank you, she said. He nodded once and left. She looked at the note still lying face down on her desk. She turned it back over. She read it once more, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to know how it felt the second time. Felt the same. She closed her notebook, turned off her desk lamp, and went home to prepare for an 8 o'clock meeting she had already decided to attend on her terms, not his. She arrived on the 32nd floor at 7:58, 2 minutes early, which was the precise message she intended to send. Not eager. Not afraid. Present, on schedule, and fully herself. His assistant, a quiet young woman who did not introduce herself, led her to the office without being asked if she had an appointment. The door was open. J1 was standing at the window with his back to the room, looking at the skyline that October had turned gray and specific. He did not turn when she entered. She sat down without being invited. There was a beat, perhaps 2 seconds, and then something shifted in how he was standing. Not a flinch. A recalibration. The way a person recalibrates when a situation reveals itself to be operating by different rules than the ones they prepared for. He turned, finally, and moved to his desk, and sat across from her, and she noticed for the first time that someone had placed a small ceramic cup of green tea on her side of the desk. Steam still rising. Made before she arrived. He didn't explain it. He opened his legal pad. She had expected an ambush dressed as a meeting. A polite cataloging of her department's deficiencies, delivered in the measured tone of someone who had already decided the outcome and was simply building the documentation. She had lived through 3 restructurings in 23 years, and she knew how the language worked. The careful framing, the "we value your contributions" paragraph that always preceded the however. The meeting was not that. He asked her specific questions. Not general questions. Not "tell me about your department's goals" or "walk me through your team structure." He asked her why the Eastern distribution workflow had been restructured in the third quarter of 2019, and when she answered, because the legacy routing system was losing 18 hours per shipment cycle and nobody else had bothered to do the math on the cumulative cost. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, that was the right call. 4 words. Delivered with no particular warmth and no performance of approval. Just a man reading a situation accurately and saying so. She did not let it move her. But she noted, with a part of her brain that tracked these things, that it had been 4 years since anyone in a position of authority in this building had said those 4 words to her about anything. She drank none of the tea. She did not touch the cup. But she did not move it away either. He asked 3 more questions, all of them specific, all of them demonstrating a level of preparation that meant he had read her documentation the way a person reads something they intend to understand and not merely reference. When the meeting ended, he stood, and she stood, and neither of them performed pleasantry. She picked up her notebook. She walked to the door. In the corridor, moving toward the elevator, she played the meeting back and tried to locate the trap inside it. She turned it over carefully, the way you check a room when the lights come back on after a power cut. Not panicked, just methodical. Checking corners. She could not find the trap. This bothered her more than the trap would have. The calendar invite arrived before she reached her floor. His office to hers. Electronic. Formal. Operational Integration Review. Conference Room 32B. And CC'd, in a column that she read twice, the CFO. The board liaison whose name she had only ever seen on forwarded emails. She stood in the elevator with her phone in her hand, and the doors opened and she didn't move for a moment. He was either constructing her exposure in front of the entire executive tier, or he was constructing her elevation in front of the same. She could not yet tell which. What she could tell was that the meeting she had just left had been preparation for this one, and that COJ1 did not schedule things casually, and that she had approximately 18 hours to decide how to walk into that room. She stepped off the elevator. She went back to her desk and opened her operational files, and she began to build the most precise version of herself that data could produce. She spent that evening cross-referencing every document she had flagged as significant. The operational metrics, the workflow restructuring from 2019, the quarterly efficiency reports that had been submitted and acknowledged and never once cited in any executive presentation she had been invited to attend. She built the case the way she always built things, from the foundation up, each layer load-bearing, nothing decorative. Before she closed her laptop, she did something she had told herself she was not going to do. She ran a search on COJ1. Not the company bio. She had read that the day the board announcement went out, the same afternoon as the wrong door. She went further. Previous restructuring assignments. Outcomes. Names of companies and whether those companies still existed in the same form they had before he arrived. She found 7 engagements over 14 years. The pattern was consistent. When he was finished, the company was smaller, leaner, and organized around a different center of gravity than the one it had started with. The people who had built the original structures were rarely still there. The companies survived. The people were harder to track. She closed the laptop at midnight and did not dream. The integration review the next morning was in a room she knew well. The long table, the east-facing glass, the particular way voices carried in that space that had always made her choose her words in there with more care than anywhere else in the building. She arrived first. She set her notebook at a precise angle to the table edge, and she waited. The CFO came in talking to the board liaison, which meant their conversation was already shaped by something she had not been part of. J1 came in last, which she understood was not coincidence. He set his legal pad at the head of the table, center, not end, and she noticed, as he turned to a specific page of notes, that his handwriting switched mid-line between English and what she now recognized as Korean, sometimes within the same sentence. She said nothing about this. She filed it. What happened in the next 40 minutes was not what she had prepared for, though what she had prepared was good and she would have used it well. Instead, J1 presented her department's data to the room in a way that repositioned her operational infrastructure as the company's connective tissue. He used her numbers, Her actual numbers, the ones in the documentation she had prepared, but also older ones she hadn't pulled for this meeting because she hadn't been sure anyone had ever read them, and he built a case in front of the CFO and the board liaison that reframed her department not as a cost center to be managed, but as the architecture that held the revenue-generating departments upright. She sat there and she watched him do this. She felt two things at the same time, and they ran in opposite directions. One of them was something she recognized as gratitude, which she identified and immediately put under quarantine because she did not yet have enough information to know what this was costing him or what he intended to collect for it. The other one was a quieter and more complicated thing. The feeling of a woman watching someone accomplish in 40 minutes what she had spent 23 years trying to make this institution see, and understanding that the only reason the room was receiving it now was because a man with a Korean accent and a bespoke charcoal suit was delivering it. She kept both things still in her chest, and her face gave away neither. After the CFO and the board liaison left, she stood to collect her notebook. J1 was closing his legal pad. He didn't look at her. "They'll try to use this meeting against you," he said. "They'll say I'm building alliances. That you've been co-opted." She stopped moving. "Are you?" He picked up the legal pad. "I'm doing my job." He left the room first. She stood there for a moment with his words still occupying the space and no clear way to interpret them, which was a feeling she was not accustomed to and did not enjoy. She was in the hallway when Brianna from her team fell into step beside her. Brianna was 31 and talented, and the kind of earnest that Celestine sometimes found difficult to look at directly because it reminded her of something. "How do you do that?" Brianna asked. "Always know exactly what to say. Stay so completely calm." Celestine looked at her. "Practice," she said. The word came out smaller than she intended. Flat and brief, like a door closing. Brianna nodded like it was an answer, and Celestine kept walking, and the space where the real answer would have lived stayed empty behind them. That evening she booked a conference room under a neutral project name and pulled the booking history for the past 90 days. 2 minutes into the search she found it. Conference Room 32B. An operational integration review. The same title, the same attendees, scheduled and cancelled 31 days earlier. Before she had walked through the wrong door. Her department had been on that agenda already. Something had changed. She sat with the empty conference room booking on her screen and thought about timing, and she thought about doors, and she thought about what kind of man schedules the same meeting twice with the same title and the same attendees but a different outcome, and she had not yet found the answer when she shut the laptop and went home. The first name she knew personally was Jerome Whitfield, who had been in vendor relations for 16 years and kept a photograph of his granddaughter on his desk and always said good morning to every person he passed in the hallway, including the cleaning staff, which Celestine had noticed and respected from the beginning. The second was Carol Osei from procurement, who made pepper soup every January for the team potluck and laughed so easily that she made the whole floor sound warmer than it was. Both of them signed the voluntary separation paperwork on the same morning, 3 days after the integration review. There was a farewell lunch that Celestine organized because no one else moved fast enough to do it, and she chose Harlem's, which was 40 minutes from the office and not convenient for anyone except that it had been the place for these moments for 15 years. The send-offs and the milestones and the one retirement party where James from logistics had cried and nobody pretended not to see. The baked catfish came out the way it always did. The butter rolls. The peach cobbler that Celestine ordered for the table, even though she would not eat much of it because she needed to stay sharp for the afternoon, and sugar at noon made her careful. She held it together through all of it. Through Jerome's speech about his granddaughter. Through Carol's laugh, which appeared 3 times during the lunch and each time hit Celestine somewhere behind the sternum. She held it completely and cleanly, and she said the right things and meant them. On her way back to the office, walking through the parking deck, Brianna appeared beside her again. "How do you do that?" she asked, and Celestine understood she did not mean the logistics of the lunch. She meant the composure. The way Celestine had sat there for 2 hours in the middle of grief and institutional loss and not cracked in any visible direction. Celestine started to answer. The same word formed in her throat, practice, and for a moment she felt the specific flatness of it before she had even said it, the way you feel the temperature of a room before you find the thermostat. She said it anyway, practice. Brianna nodded. They walked in silence the rest of the way to the elevator. And somewhere in that silence Celestine was aware that she had answered the question the same way twice now, which meant it was not an answer. It was a reflex. Those were different things, and she was smart enough to know the difference, and knowing it did not stop her from doing it. If you are a woman who has ever had to hold yourself together in a room that was taking something from you, you understand exactly what that walk back to the elevator cost. And if this story is reaching something real in you, subscribe. This channel is built for women like her. Women like you. Back at her desk, with the afternoon assembling itself into ordinary tasks that felt surreal against the morning, she found an email in her inbox with no subject line and a sender address she did not recognize. A personal Gmail, unaffiliated with any company account. She almost deleted it. She opened it instead. It was a financial document. 2 pages. The language was specific and technical, and she understood most of it and looked up the parts she didn't. It was a preliminary asset evaluation. Her department appeared on the second page under a column header that read retained. Transition purposes only. She read the phrase transition purposes twice. She did not print the document. She read it once more, closed it, and sat with what she had just learned. Her department was not being preserved because it was valued. It was being preserved because it was useful. For the handoff, whatever the handoff was to, and after that she was disposable, and so was everyone who reported to her. The difference between indispensable and merely useful was the difference between a load-bearing wall and a piece of furniture, and someone had just told her, by sending this document, which column she was in. She opened her grandmother's leather notebook and set it flat on the desk in front of her and put both hands on either side of it and sat there in the particular silence of a woman who has just been told the truth she was already half prepared for and needs a moment before she can move. She needed the moment. She allowed herself that. Then she stood up, smoothed her jacket, and walked to the 32nd floor to find J1. She was 10 feet from his door when she heard him through it. She could not understand a single word. She had not expected to, but she had worked alongside enough people in her life to recognize the specific tonality of a man arguing on behalf of something. Not for himself, but for something he was trying to protect. The Korean came through the door clipped and taut, and she stood in the hallway and she listened to it for a moment without moving. She did not knock. She walked back to the elevator and pressed the button and stood there trying to decide what to do with a man she could not read, who was either doing something to her or doing something for her. And the distance between those two possibilities was exactly the distance between the version of her life that had happened so far and the version she couldn't yet see. He came to her. The next morning, 8:15, and she was at her desk reviewing vendor contracts that suddenly felt very small when she looked up and found him standing in her doorway. He had not sent a note this time. He had not scheduled it. He was simply there, in her space for the first time, which she registered as a shift in something she could not yet name. "Do you have a few minutes?" he said. It was not quite a question. She gestured at the chair across from her desk. He sat down and she noticed he did not bring his legal pad, only himself, hands folded on his knees, which meant this was not a meeting he was documenting. "The board has moved the timeline," he said. "What was 8 months is now 4. She watched his face. "When did they decide that?" "I was informed 3 days ago." She thought about the cancelled meeting. The original date. The 31 days between. "And you're telling me now?" "I'm telling you before anyone from HR tells you," he said, "because there's a difference." She was quiet for a moment, taking the measure of that sentence, and the man sitting across from her desk who had offered it without apparent need for her to thank him for it. "Is my department being cut?" she said. He held the question for a beat without deflecting it. "Not by me." 3 words. A specific, limited answer. Not a reassurance, a precise demarcation of the thing he could and could not claim. She recognized the precision of it the way she recognized good structural work. It held weight because it was honest about what it was not claiming to hold. She did not trust it, but she noted it. He stood. He was at her doorway when he stopped and turned back, and she saw something move across his face that did not have a clean professional name. "You built something real here," he said. "It's visible in the data. I want you to know I see it." Then he left, and she sat with that sentence the way you sit with something that arrived at the wrong time, from the wrong direction, and had no category to be filed under. That night, and this she would not know, could not know, J1 sat on the edge of his hotel bed with his phone in his hand after his mother's call had ended. She had asked, as she asked every call, when he was going to bring someone home. He had said what he always said, that his work required everything right now, that there was no space for it, that she should not worry. The answer came out so smoothly and completely that his mother accepted it without pushing back, which was the measure of how well worn it was. The answer had become so familiar that neither of them noticed it anymore. Not him, not his mother, not the silence that followed it on both ends of the line. He set the phone down on the nightstand. He did not move for a long time. Meanwhile, in the quiet of her home office, Celestine was doing the thing she was best at, noticing what did not add up. She had pulled the official restructuring timeline against the encrypted document she had received. She laid the numbers beside each other and she looked at them the way she had looked at routing inefficiencies in 2019 and operational cost gaps in 2021. The way she looked at anything that claimed to be one thing but moved like another. The numbers were not the same numbers. The official timeline showed projected departmental savings of $14 million over 4 years. The asset evaluation document showed a liquidation value assessment that assumed full departmental dissolution within 18 months. Not restructuring. Dissolution. Two completely different end states, presented in two completely different documents, one of which had been given to her by someone who was not supposed to exist in her inbox. Someone in this company was operating with two different sets of books. She read both documents again. Then she opened a new draft email addressed to no one, typed the phrase "two sets of books" in the subject line, and stared at it. She closed the draft without sending it. She went to find J1. She went to his office. She raised her hand to knock. Through the door, she heard him on the phone again, and this time the tone was different. Not arguing. Something harder and quieter than arguing. The voice of a man who has just understood something he did not want to understand. She stood there with her hand still raised. Then she lowered it, pulled out her phone, and called his work cell directly. He picked up in 2 rings. "I found something," she said. "And you need to see it." "Not on the phone." There was a pause. "Not on the phone," he agreed. "There's a coffee place on Peachtree," she said. "Near the parking deck on Forsyth. 7:30 tomorrow morning." She had named the location. She had named the time. She waited. "I'll be there," he said. She hung up and stood in the hallway outside his door with the phone still warm in her hand, and the question that was running through every chamber of her mind was not whether she could trust him. It was whether, at this particular juncture, in this particular building, with what she now knew living in an encrypted email on her personal phone, she could afford not to. The coffee place on Peachtree was the kind of establishment that existed in the gaps between things, between the parking deck and the dry cleaner, between the morning rush and the mid-morning quiet, small enough that no one from Meridian had ever suggested it for a work meeting. That was why she had chosen it. Celestine arrived at 7:20, ordered a black coffee she did not need, and took the table in the back left corner where she could see the door and the door could not see her first. He arrived at 7:28. He scanned the room when he entered, a quick, practiced inventory, the kind of look that recorded everything without appearing to, and when his eyes found her in the corner something in his posture settled, like a man who had been carrying a low-level readiness and was now allowing himself to set it down. He ordered nothing at the counter. He came directly to the table and sat across from her. She had the documents open on her phone, screenshots of both files side by side. She did not lead with them. She looked at him first. "Before I show you anything," she said, "I need to know what you were told when they brought you here." He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive. Considering. That the company was carrying structural inefficiencies that were pushing it toward insolvency. That a focused restructuring over 8 months could return it to profitability. That my role was to identify what needed to change and implement it. "And you believed that." "I had no reason not to." She slid her phone across the table. "You have one now." He looked at both documents the way she had looked at them. Methodically, without alarm, the way a person reads something they want to understand correctly before they react to it. She watched his face. She was good at reading faces, and his was not an easy one, but she had been watching it for 3 weeks now, and she knew the difference between his professional stillness and the other kind. What moved across it as he read was not anger. It was something older and quieter than anger. Recognition. The specific expression of a man who has just located a pattern he has seen before and hoped he would not see again. He set the phone down. The CFO appeared in the doorway of the coffee shop at that moment, and Celestine went still in a way that was different from her professional stillness. A complete, rapid reorientation, her mind recalculating the geometry of the room. Richard Paulson's office. The door she had been trying to reach when she walked through the wrong one. He scanned the room the way J1 had, found them, and came to the table with his coat still on and the look of a man who had not slept in a reasonable number of days. He sat down without being invited, which told her he was frightened enough that social architecture had stopped mattering to him. She needs to understand what she's holding, the CFO said to J1, as if Celestine were not present. She looked at him with the specific quality of attention she reserved for moments when she needed a person to remember she was in the room. Then explain it to me directly, she said. I'm right here. The CFO blinked. Then, perhaps because he recognized that she was the only person at this table whose records had not been touched, he began to talk. The prospective buyer had been in conversation with 3 board members for 7 months. The restructuring was not designed to return the company to profitability. It was designed to surface a clean valuation for a pre-negotiated sale, to make the asset look lean and unencumbered by the time the purchase agreement was executed. J1 had been brought in because his reputation for clean restructuring would lend the process legitimacy. His presence was the credibility the sale needed to avoid regulatory scrutiny. He had been used as a signature on a document he did not know he was signing. She watched J1's face during this. She watched him take it in, the same way he had taken in the documents, without falling apart, but with a quality of interior reckoning that was not small. The CFO was still talking, still building toward his ask. Quiet submission, back channels, protect the company's public standing, and she saw the exact moment J1 heard the phrase back channels and looked at her. He had used his nunchi in that meeting in the integration review, and he used it now. He watched her face as the CFO said protect the company, and he saw, in the particular quality of her stillness, that she had heard these words before. That this language had been used on her before. That she knew exactly what back channels meant for a woman in her position, which was that the problem would be managed quietly and she would be the thing that got managed. He looked back at the CFO. We're not doing this through back channels, he said. Whatever we decide to do, it goes through counsel. The CFO stared at him. That is not. Through counsel, J1 said again. Not loudly. The kind of quiet that does not leave room for negotiation. The CFO left 10 minutes later, unsatisfied and unable to say so cleanly. The door closed behind him and the coffee shop noise reassembled around the table, and Celestine sat with what had just happened and did not immediately perform a reaction to it. J1 was looking at the table. Then he looked at her. I need to know whether what I was told about this company was ever true, he said. His voice was different from his meeting voice. It was the voice underneath the voice, not softer exactly, but without the professional architecture around it. Not the data. I've read the data. I need to know what you saw, what you've known, how long you've known it. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she looked away. First. For the first time in this entire story, she broke contact first, and she did not fully understand why until much later. I've been trying to save this company, she said, for 23 years. Ask me anything. She got up. He drove her back to the parking deck in a car that was clean and dark and quiet. Before she got out, he said the thing about the pre-sale agreement, the thing about having been here before in a different city and not seeing it in time, and she listened to all of it, and then she opened the door and stepped out, and she said, then don't miss it this time. She walked to her car. She sat down. She put her hands on the wheel. She drove back to the office, and she did not let herself think about the way his voice had sounded when the professional architecture left it, because that was a thing she could not afford to think about yet. They began the early mornings in her office, 6:30, before the building filled, before Dara arrived, before the floor became a place that had to be performed in. He brought his laptop. She cleared half of her desk. They worked in parallel first, sharing documents across the table, building a unified picture of what the company's operational data actually showed versus what had been presented to the board and the prospective buyer. She was good at this. So was he. The specific rhythm of two people who think carefully and differently and are both secure enough to work without performing. She felt it on the third morning and recognized it as rare. She did not say so. On the fourth morning he was 20 minutes late. No message. No explanation. He simply was not there at 6:30 when she arrived and set up her materials, and she waited until 6:40 and then she did what she did. She reorganized. She restructured the shared working documents into a system that ran through her access points. A parallel filing architecture that meant if he stopped coming, she could continue without losing anything they had built together. It was efficient. It was thorough. It was completely unconscious, the way breathing is unconscious, the way straightening objects that have not moved is unconscious. He arrived at 6:52. He set his bag down and looked at the documents on the desk. He was quiet for a moment that she could feel the shape of. "Were you expecting me not to come back?" he said. She did not answer. The answer was yes, or the answer was I was not going to need to find out, which were the same answer dressed differently. He reached across the desk and moved a folder from her stack to the center of the table. The shared space. He placed it there carefully, like a person replacing something that had been moved without cause. And then he opened his laptop and did not say anything else about it. She looked at the folder in the center of the table. She left it there. They had been working in silence for 20 minutes when she slid the full document set across to him. Both pages. The financial record she had cross-referenced, the asset evaluation, the timeline discrepancy. Everything she had assembled since the coffee shop. He read through it without rushing, and she watched his hands on the pages. Steady. No performance of steadiness, just a man who had learned to be still under pressure because the alternative had cost him something, somewhere, that she did not yet know the name of. When he finished, he looked up. She was already looking at him. She said nothing. He said nothing. The silence between them was not empty. It had specific weight and specific temperature, and in it was everything that the last 3 weeks had been building toward. All the wariness and the precision and the moments of almost trust and the moments of armor, and she held his gaze and he held hers and the morning light was flat and gray through her office window and neither of them moved. He said quietly, "This is enough." For what? For counsel. For outside counsel, not the company's. She nodded once. He refilled her tea from the thermos he had started bringing on the second morning, which she had stopped registering as unusual because by then it had become simply the way the mornings ran. She let him. She picked up the cup. "I need you to know," he said, "that when I agreed to come here, when I took this engagement, I was told something specific." He paused in a way that was unusual for him, as if the next sentence needed to be exact. "I was told the company had 1 year left if nothing changed. That there were people here who had built real things and they deserved a chance to survive the restructuring." She looked at him. "I believed that," he said. "I want you to know I believed it." She understood what he was doing. He was not asking for absolution. He was creating a record between them, a personal record, not a professional one, of what he had known and when and under what impression he had operated. He was accounting to her. That was different from apologizing, and she understood the difference, and it landed differently because of it. "I know you believed it," she said. They went back to work. The board found out on a Wednesday. She didn't know how, whether someone on the floor had noticed the early mornings, whether the CFO had said something to protect himself, whether the building itself had the particular institutional immune response of all large organizations when something moves through them that was not authorized. She arrived at her desk that morning to an email from HR. Pending review of interdepartmental communications. Please work remotely until further notice. 12 words. Carbon copied to 3 names she recognized and 2 she didn't. She read it twice. Then she read it again to make sure she was reading it correctly and not reading the thing she was afraid it said. She was reading it correctly. She packed her bag slowly. She touched each thing as she put it away. The legal pads, the operational files, the folder with the documents she and J1 had been building together, the framed photograph of her nieces in the yellow dresses which she did not pack because packing the photograph would mean she was preparing for a version of events she was not yet willing to accept. She left the photograph on the desk and she left the desk lamp on, which was not logical, but it meant something to her and she did not examine what. She was in the elevator when her phone rang. It was Marcus. He told her that the interim HR director, A woman who had been in the role for 6 weeks and answered directly to the board liaison had reached out to him that morning. The question had been phrased carefully, which Marcus understood meant it had been phrased with legal awareness. The question was whether Celestine had ever exhibited signs of difficulty working within leadership structures or challenges with institutional authority. Marcus said the phrase difficulty with leadership, and Celestine was quiet for a moment. That had a very specific quality. The quality of a woman hearing a sentence she has heard before in a different decade, in a different meeting room, from a different mouth, and recognizing it the way you recognize whether that has already ruined something you loved. At 31. The passed-over promotion. Perhaps not ready for the visibility the role requires. The man she had trained, promoted above her, who had never once looked uncomfortable about it. "What did you tell them?" she said. "I haven't answered yet," Marcus said. "I called you first." She stepped off the elevator into the lobby. "Tell them the truth," she said. "Tell them I am the most stable thing in that building right now." She said it without heat. She said it the way you state something that does not require defense because it is simply accurate. She said it standing in the lobby of the building she had worked in for 23 years with her bag on her shoulder, and her desk lamp still on upstairs, and her niece's photograph still on her desk. And she meant every word of it with a completeness that required no performance. Marcus said, "Yes, ma'am," which was not something he said often, and she understood it as what it was. She went home. She set up her kitchen table with the same organization as her desk, legal pad on the left, laptop centered, the leather notebook on the right where she could reach it, and she opened the files and she kept working. That evening, her personal phone received a message from a number she had never seen. No text, just an image attachment. She opened it. It was a photograph of a document. The header read letter of intent, confidential, pre-execution draft. The date on it was 7 months ago. 4 months before J1 had been brought in. 3 months before the board had announced the restructuring to anyone in the company. The parties named in the letter were the 3 board members and the acquiring firm. J1's name was not in it anywhere. He had been brought in after the deal was already structured. He had not been a decision-maker. He had been a credential. A piece of professional theater designed to make a predetermined outcome look like a process. She set the phone face down on the kitchen table and put both hands flat on the surface beside it and breathed through it. She thought about a man who had spent 14 years believing he was the person who saved companies. She thought about what it felt like to be used as a signature. She had some experience with that. She knew which specific part of a person it reached. She picked up the phone and called him. He picked up before the second ring. She told him about the letter of intent. She read him the date. She heard him go quiet in a way that was different from his professional quiet. It had a texture to it, a density, like a room after something has been dropped in it. 7 months, he said. 7 months, she confirmed. There was a long pause. She waited through it without filling it, because she understood that what was happening on his end of the line was something that needed room, and she had enough respect for him now to give it that. "I think I've been here before," he said finally. His voice had the quality it had in the coffee shop, without the professional architecture, just the man underneath the work. "Different city. Different company. I missed it that time." Another pause. "I told myself I had done what I was hired to do and that the outcome was not my responsibility. I told myself that for 2 years. She did not offer him absolution. She did not offer him reassurance. She sat with the truth of what he had just said and let it be true. "What are you going to do?" she said. "I don't know yet." And then, "What would you do?" It was not a rhetorical question. He was asking her specifically, not as a sounding board, not for strategic input, but as a person whose judgment he had decided, at some point she had not been told about, to trust. She was quiet for long enough that the silence became noticeable. "I would do the thing," she said. "That would let me look at myself in 20 years. She had not planned to say that. It came up from somewhere below strategy, below composure, from the place where her grandmother's leather notebook lived and the yellow dress photograph lived and the real answer to Brianna's question about practice lived. It was not wisdom. It was not advice. It was a woman telling the truth about her own standard. Not success, not safety, but the specific ability to meet her own eyes in 2 decades without looking away. He didn't respond immediately. When he did, he said, "Yes," quietly, as if she had described something he had been looking for the name of. She started the car. The garage was completely silent around her. She sat in it for a moment with the engine running and both hands on the wheel and something loosening in her chest that had been held tight for so long she had forgotten it was held. Not resolve weakening. Not composure cracking. Something else. The beginning of a woman deciding, in the quietest possible way, that she was finished carrying the weight of other people's cowardice as if it were her own. She drove to the office. She used her keycard, which was still active. They had not thought to deactivate it yet, which meant they had not yet decided she was truly dangerous. She walked through the lobby and up the elevator and down the quiet hallway, and she knocked on his office door and he opened it almost immediately, which meant he had been awake and moving, which meant he had already started deciding before she arrived. "We need to write the real report," she said. He stepped back to let her in. The building at 2 in the morning had a specific quality, the HVAC cycling through its night settings, the cleaning crew long gone from this floor, the city outside the window reduced to orange light and the occasional car. She had worked late in this building hundreds of times across 23 years. She had never worked late in it like this. They had 2 laptops open between them, her operational records on one and his financial models on the other, and they built the document the way you build something that is meant to last. Not quickly, not for an audience, but accurately, each claim sourced and each source verified and each page numbered and the argument constructed so that it did not need anyone to champion it because it was simply true in a way that could be confirmed by anyone with access to the same documents and an honest way. She had been in enough rooms with enough people to know that 2 people working toward the same thing at the same time in the same space without ego was not common. She noted it without commenting on it. He noted it also, she could tell, in the way he adjusted his approach to her rhythm without drawing attention to the adjustment. Around 4 in the morning his assistant's name appeared on a container that had been sitting in the break room refrigerator. She had apparently started leaving food for him sometime in the second week, understanding that he would not remember to eat. Rice, firm and slightly cooled, and 4 small dishes beside it in their separate compartments. He put the container on the desk between their laptops without ceremony and they ate from it while they worked, and she did not comment on the food and he did not explain it, and there was something in the matter-of-factness of it. The shared meal at 4 in the morning over documents that could end both their careers, that she filed away in the part of herself that she had stopped letting most people reach. By 5:30 they had it. Not a restructuring recommendation. A legal case. Documented board misconduct. Financial misrepresentation to the prospective buyer. Breach of fiduciary duty to existing shareholders. A complete record, sourced from documents that neither of them had falsified or selectively obtained, that told the truth about what had been done and by whom and on what timeline. He looked at the document on the screen for a long moment. "If I send this," he said, "I'm finished in this industry in the conventional sense. No board will hire a restructuring officer who turned a document over to counsel against his own client." "I know," she said. "If you're associated with it, they'll come after your record. They'll find something. They always find something. I know that too." He looked at her. She looked at him. The flat early morning light was beginning at the window, not sunrise yet, just the gray preliminary to it, and she thought about 20 years from now, and she thought about the look on her own face in that future mirror, and she thought about Jerome Whitfield, who said good morning to everyone in the hallway, including the cleaning staff, and who had signed a voluntary separation agreement on a Tuesday because no one had told him the truth in time. "Send it to outside counsel," she said, "and send it to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution business desk with a source protection request." He looked at her. "That was going to be my next sentence," he said. She felt something that she might, in another life or a more forgiving decade, have called a smile. She did not perform it. It simply passed through her and was gone. He sent the document at 5:47 in the morning. To outside counsel. To the newspaper. CC'd to the board, to the company's general counsel, and to the CFO, who would have to decide which side of the record he wanted to be on before the morning finished. They sat back in their respective chairs, and the sent confirmation sat on the screen between them, and the building was still quiet. She asked if he was afraid. "Yes," he said. "You?" "Yes." She thought for a moment. "Good," she said. "Means we're still paying attention." They closed the laptops at 6:15 and she took the elevator down and walked to her car, and the sky was the color it turns in the few minutes before the sun actually appears. Not dark anymore, not light yet, something between the two that does not have a good name. She drove home. She showered and changed and came back, and by 9 o'clock both their keycards had been deactivated simultaneously. The emergency board meeting was called for 10 a.m. Neither of them was invited. The building at 2 in the morning had a specific quality: the HVAC cycling through its night settings, the cleaning crew long gone from this floor, the city outside the window reduced to orange light, and the occasional car. She had worked late in this building hundreds of times across 23 years. She had never worked late in it like this. They had 2 laptops open between them, her operational records on one and his financial models on the other, and they built the document the way you build something that is meant to last. Not quickly, not for an audience, but accurately, each claim sourced and each source verified and each page numbered and the argument constructed so that it did not need anyone to champion it because it was simply true in a way that could be confirmed by anyone with access to the same documents and an honest. She had been in enough rooms with enough people to know that 2 people working toward the same thing at the same time in the same space without ego was not common. She noted it without commenting on it. He noted it also, she could tell, in the way he adjusted his approach to her rhythm without drawing attention to the adjustment. Around 4 in the morning his assistant's name appeared on a container that had been sitting in the break room refrigerator. She had apparently started leaving food for him sometime in the second week, understanding that he would not remember to eat. Rice, firm and slightly cooled, and 4 small dishes beside it in their separate compartments. He put the container on the desk between their laptops without ceremony, and they ate from it while they worked, and she did not comment on the food and he did not explain it, and there was something in the matter-of-factness of it. The shared meal at 4 in the morning over documents that could end both their careers, that she filed away in the part of herself that she had stopped letting most people reach. By 5:30 they had it. Not a restructuring recommendation. A legal case. Documented board misconduct. Financial misrepresentation to the prospective buyer. Breach of fiduciary duty to existing shareholders. A complete record, sourced from documents that neither of them had falsified or selectively obtained, that told the truth about what had been done and by whom and on what timeline. He looked at the document on the screen for a long moment. "If I send this," he said, "I'm finished in this industry in the conventional sense. No board will hire a restructuring officer who turned a document over to counsel against his own client." "I know," she said. "If you're associated with it, they'll come after your record. They'll find something. They always find something. I know that too." He looked at her. She looked at him. The flat early morning light was beginning at the window, not sunrise yet, just the gray preliminary to it. And she thought about 20 years from now, and she thought about the look on her own face in that future mirror, and she thought about Jerome Whitfield, who said good morning to everyone in the hallway, including the cleaning staff, and who had signed a voluntary separation agreement on a Tuesday because no one had told him the truth in time. "Send it to outside counsel," she said, "and send it to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution business desk with a source protection request." He looked at her. "That was going to be my next sentence," he said. She felt something that she might, in another life or a more forgiving decade, have called a smile. She did not perform it. It simply passed through her and was gone. He sent the document at 5:47 in the morning. To outside counsel. To the newspaper. CC'd to the board, to the company's general counsel, and to the CFO, who would have to decide which side of the record he wanted to be on before the morning finished. They sat back in their respective chairs, and the sent confirmation sat on the screen between them, and the building was still quiet. She asked if he was afraid. "Yes," he said. "You?" "Yes." She thought for a moment. "Good," she said. "Means we're still paying attention." They closed the laptops at 6:15 and she took the elevator down and walked to her car, and the sky was the color it turns in the few minutes before the sun actually appears. Not dark anymore, not light yet, something between the two that does not have a good name. She drove home. She showered and changed and came back, and by 9 o'clock both their keycards had been deactivated simultaneously. The emergency board meeting was called for 10 a.m. Neither of them was invited. Thank you for watching Afro Korean Tales and Stories. As we close this story, I want to say something to the women watching. Some of you have lived through moments like this. Moments where you had to stand alone. Moments where you chose dignity over comfort. Moments where you refused to be bought, silenced, or pushed aside. That kind of strength doesn't always make noise, but it changes rooms. If you are a woman who believes respect is worth more than money, if you believe character still matters, if you believe dignity should never be negotiated, then this channel was made for you. I tell stories about women who stand firm, women who earn respect without begging for it, women who remind powerful people that integrity cannot be purchased. If that speaks to you, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this community. And if this story touched you, comment the word dignity below. I read your comments, and they help these stories reach more women like you. Until the next story, remember, not every powerful person leads with honor, but every strong woman carries it within her. I'll see you in the next one.